Hello, I'm Jane Welsh with episode 3 of the Vancouver Ballet Society's series Stories from the Archive for the 75th anniversary 2022. Today it's the boys. The first of the boys is Ian Gibson. All BC dancers of that generation were born to modest families during the social upheaval after World War I. They grew up in the Depression, and then war came. History was against them. Talent wasn't enough. They needed grit to push the limit of human agency. And yet, a dozen or so launched from June Roper's studio at the back of the Orpheum went on to international stardom. My hope is the current generation, so unfortunately stalled by this pandemic, will find inspiration in these stories. Scottish-born Ian was raised in Victoria. He started dance young. His mother said to correct his pigeon toes, but it wasn't really. Wise mother. Described as a sensitive outlier, I wonder whether his outwardly beauty was of a benefit to him. But his talent was a gift from the gods. Even as a teenager, his ballon attracted notice in the 1936 production of Coppelia at the Royal Theatre in Victoria, the first Coppelia in North America, produced by his teacher, Dorothy Wilson. Dorothy later took over June Roper's studio in Vancouver. June Roper began teaching Ian the difficult leaps and turns necessary for the male classical repertoire. In 1938, she took him to LA for coaching by her own teacher, Ernest Belcher, for his American debut at the Hollywood Bowl in a festival. Back in Vancouver, he auditioned for Leonid Massine of Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo. He received an offer. Join us in April. He sailed to Europe and joined them for their summer season. September 3rd, war broke out. The company left without Ian. He was detained until he could get his exit visa. Stressful, I'm sure. But he got to New York in time for the season at the Met. During the tours of North and South America, he soon worked his way up to soloist. Coached by Fokine for his solo debut in Mexico City in Spectre de la Rose with Annabelle Leon. Not long after, he danced it in Vancouver, delighting local audiences with his leaps Nijinsky made famous. The press called him Canada's Nijinsky. In 1941, he joined Ballet Theatre, later known as American Ballet Theatre. In New York, Ian wowed audiences with his elevation as the suitor in Nijinsky's La Fille Mal Gardée, and as Bluebird in Anton Dolan's arrangement of dances from Sleeping Beauty. For a revival of Spectre de la Rose, he was again coached by Fokine. Indeed, he was the last dancer ever to be coached in the role. He danced in Helen of Troy, leads in Billy the Kid, Le Carnival, and Petrushka, a great character role for Nijinsky, later danced by Baryshnikov. Gibson was a shooting star, a gift of nature and good training, but nature's timing was off. It hit him the hardest. He left the stage to do 3 years on a submarine as lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Navy. Can you imagine what that did to him? It gives me the shivers. I've been on an old submarine, docked to New Westminster. It was terribly claustrophobic, and I was above water. I have body memory just thinking of Ian confined on one of those. It took its toll. At war's end, he wasn't able to rebuild his body, and heartbroken, he wanted nothing more to do with dance. I think of dancers today, waiting instead of dancing, careers interrupted. Sir Anton Dolan wrote of Ian, "The young Canadian created a furor in La Spectre de la Rose. I never saw Nijinsky dance, but I'm sure Gibson rose as high and effortlessly into the air and flew through the window as Nijinsky did in his legendary days." Further, he says, "When the war ended, Ian was demobbed, but we'd lost a magnificent dancer. The last time I saw him, he was behind a counter at Macy's." But fate wasn't quite as grim as Anton Dolan implies. Ian was in management training at Macy's. He married dancer Nina Frecken, and had 2 children and went on to a successful business career in taxes in New York. Still, war prevented Ian from completing his arc as an artist, a loss for him and for us. In 1978, Vancouver dance writer Leyland Winridge asked June Roper to contact Ian. June phoned him in New Jersey, and he was thrilled to reconnect. He did attend the American Ballet Theatre's 40th anniversary in 1980, 38 years after he had been on the stage. Ian died in New Jersey in 2008. For more than a fleeting moment, Ian Gibson was one of the greats. And by the way, Anton Dolan was another great. He danced with Ballet Russe from 1921 and Ballet Theatre until 1946. He kept himself in the public eye as a director and a choreographer and travelled the world setting ballets. In 1983, he was here in Vancouver to set Pas de Quatre on Pacific Ballet Theatre, the forerunner to Ballet British Columbia. He died a few months later in Paris. That's the story of Ian Gibson, trained in Vancouver by June Roper and Dorothy Wilson. I'm Jane Welsh for the Vancouver Ballet Society. Thank you for watching.